Every 65 seconds, someone in America develops Alzheimer's disease. By the time you finish watching this introduction, another brain will have crossed that line. Alzheimer's is now the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, and the number of cases is climbing every single year. Most people believe dementia is genetic, that it is written into your DNA, and there is nothing you can do about it. That is one of the most dangerous myths in modern medicine, because research increasingly shows that what you eat every single day either protects your brain or quietly destroys it. The 7 foods I am about to walk you through are not strange, exotic, or obviously dangerous. They are sitting in your refrigerator right now. You probably ate at least 2 of them today, and you did it believing they were harmless or even good for you. This is not about guilt. This is not about making you afraid of your own kitchen. This is about knowing which everyday foods are silently accelerating a process that you still have the power to slow down. Now, before I give you a single food name, I need to explain something most videos skip entirely: how food actually damages your brain. Because if you do not understand the mechanism, the list is just a list, and the list does not change behavior. Understanding does. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in your body. It weighs about 2% of your total body weight, but consumes roughly 20% of everything you eat and breathe. It never shuts down. It never rests. And it is extraordinarily sensitive to what you put into your bloodstream 3, 4, 5 times a day. There are 3 specific ways food damages the brain over time. Once you see these 3 mechanisms, every food on today's list will make immediate sense. The first mechanism is neuroinflammation. Your brain has its own immune cells. They are called microglia. Think of them as a private security team that patrols brain tissue, looking for damage or infection. When everything is healthy, they do their job quietly, but certain foods activate these cells chronically, putting them on permanent high alert. When microglia stay activated for months and years, they stop protecting and start destroying. They release inflammatory chemicals that damage the very neurons they were designed to guard. That is a slow burn happening inside your skull, and you feel nothing while it is going on. The second mechanism is insulin resistance in the brain. Your brain runs on glucose, but it needs insulin to use that glucose properly. When brain cells stop responding to insulin, they cannot absorb the fuel sitting right outside their walls. They starve while surrounded by energy. Researchers now call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes for exactly this reason. The third mechanism is a breakdown of the blood-brain barrier, a microscopic security fence that keeps toxins in your bloodstream out of your brain tissue. Think of it as a fine screen door keeping insects out of your house. Certain foods punch holes in that screen, slowly, silently, over years. Once the barrier is compromised, substances that were never meant to touch brain tissue start leaking through. Every single food on today's list attacks your brain through one or more of these 3 pathways. Now you have the framework. Let's get into the list. The first food on this list is one most people eat without a second thought: ham, salami, hot dogs, bologna, bacon, the staples of quick lunches and easy dinners. You make a sandwich, toss in a few slices of deli turkey, and you move on with your day. Your brain does not move on. Processed meats contain nitrites and nitrates. These are preservatives added to keep the meat looking pink and fresh on the shelf. Inside your body, nitrites convert into compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are directly neurotoxic. That means they damage nerve cells on contact. Research has linked regular consumption of processed meat to measurably higher rates of cognitive decline and increased Alzheimer's risk. Not from eating it once, from eating it routinely, week after week, year after year. Then there is the sodium. Processed meats are one of the highest hidden sodium sources in the American diet. A few slices of deli ham can contain more sodium than a bag of potato chips, and you would never guess it because the saltiness is masked by fat and seasoning. Chronic high sodium damages the blood vessels that feed your brain, and your brain's blood supply is not a set of large, durable pipes. It is a network of extraordinarily fine tubes, some barely wider than a single blood cell. Sodium corrodes those tubes from the inside, year after year. The walls thicken, the openings narrow, and blood flow to critical brain regions drops. That is the vascular pathway to dementia, and it starts with what you thought was just a sandwich. This does not mean you can never eat meat. It means understanding that processed forms of meat carry a hidden cost your brain is quietly paying. The next 2 foods on this list often show up together, at the same meal, at the same time of day: breakfast. And for most Americans over 50, that morning routine has been doing damage for decades. Start with margarine and cheap vegetable oils. For years, people were told that margarine was the heart-healthy alternative to butter. What nobody explained clearly enough is that many margarines and processed vegetable oils contain trans fats. Trans fats are artificially modified fat molecules, and here is what makes them dangerous for your brain. Every neuron in your brain is surrounded by a membrane made of fat. That membrane needs to be flexible for the cell to communicate properly with its neighbors. When you eat trans fats, your body incorporates them into those membranes. The cell wall becomes rigid, stiff, like replacing a rubber seal with plastic. Signal transmission between neurons slows down. Multiply that across billions of brain cells over 20 or 30 years, and the result is measurable. Studies have connected regular trans fat consumption to actual brain volume shrinkage. Your brain physically gets smaller. Now add what sits next to the margarine on the breakfast table. Sugary cereals, flavored instant oatmeal, pastries, muffins, a tall glass of orange juice. The standard American breakfast is essentially a sugar delivery system. Every one of those foods causes a rapid glucose spike in your blood. Your pancreas responds with a burst of insulin. That spike crashes, and the cycle repeats the next morning. This is the type 3 diabetes mechanism from earlier, playing out in real time at your kitchen table. Repeated insulin surges over decades gradually make brain cells resistant to insulin. They lose their ability to absorb the fuel they need. The damage is cumulative, and it starts long before any symptom appears. Most people over 50 have been eating this exact breakfast for 30 or 40 years. Breakfast is either the most protective meal of your day or the most destructive. Most Americans have been eating the destructive version their entire lives without knowing it. This next one is going to surprise you because diet drinks have been marketed for decades as the healthy alternative. You gave up regular soda, you switched to diet, you felt responsible. Here is what nobody explained clearly enough. Artificial sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, and saccharin were designed to trick your taste buds into tasting sweetness without the sugar. The problem is, they also trick your brain. When your tongue detects something sweet, your brain immediately begins preparing for incoming glucose. It signals the pancreas, adjusts insulin levels, and opens metabolic pathways to process the fuel it expects to receive. But the fuel never arrives. The sweetness was a false alarm. Do that once, nothing happens. Do it every day for 10 or 20 years, and your brain's ability to regulate its own energy metabolism starts to break down. It stops trusting its own signals. Data from the Framingham Heart Study, one of the longest-running cardiovascular studies in history, found that people who drank diet soda daily had a significantly higher risk of developing dementia compared to those who did not. There is a second pathway, and this one runs through your gut. Artificial sweeteners alter your gut microbiome, the community of bacteria living in your digestive tract. That microbiome communicates directly with your brain through the vagus nerve, a major nerve highway running from your abdomen to your brainstem. When the microbiome is disrupted, it sends inflammatory signals upward. That feeds directly into the neuroinflammation cycle we covered earlier. Your brain's private security team, the microglia, gets activated not by something you ate with your mouth, but by something your gut bacteria told your brain through a nerve. The healthy swap millions of people made years ago may have been doing more harm than the thing they replaced. Stop and think about what you have heard so far. Processed meats, trans fats, sugary breakfasts, diet sodas, foods you trusted, foods you were told were safe, or even smart choices, and each one of them has been quietly working against your brain through inflammation, insulin resistance, or vascular damage. Most people hear this, feel a knot of concern, and do absolutely nothing. They watch the video, maybe share it, and go back to their day. That is the pattern I see over and over again as a physician. Knowing is only useful if you act on it. So here is what I would tell you if you were sitting across from me in my office right now. Get a baseline on your health. Know where you actually stand. Care Health is a free platform that connects you with healthcare options, screenings, and clinical trials in your area. Things like cognitive health screenings, blood sugar and metabolic panels, and new clinical trials focused on early-stage memory and brain health treatments. You fill in a short form, your date of birth, gender, a couple of quick questions. It takes 30 seconds. It costs nothing. There is no commitment. Care Health simply matches you with relevant options near you. The link is in the description below, or you can scan the QR code on screen right now with your phone camera. 30 seconds now could genuinely change what your next 10 years look like. That is not a slogan. That is what early screening does. Now let's continue, because the next two foods on this list are ones almost nobody suspects. This one lives at the center of nearly every meal in America. White bread on your sandwich at lunch, white rice next to your chicken at dinner, pasta 3 times a week, crackers from the box while you watch television. These are the invisible staples. Nobody thinks twice about them. Your brain registers every single one. To understand why, you need to know one number, the glycemic index. It measures how fast a food converts to sugar in your bloodstream. Pure glucose, straight table sugar, sits at 100. White bread scores in the mid-70s. White rice is right there with it. In practical terms, your body processes a slice of white bread almost as fast as it would process a spoonful of sugar. The spike hits your blood, your pancreas fires insulin, and the cycle we covered earlier repeats. Every high glycemic meal is another push toward insulin resistance in the brain, another step closer to brain cells that can no longer absorb their own fuel. But there is a second layer of damage most people have never heard of. When sugar floods your bloodstream repeatedly, it begins bonding to proteins throughout your body. These sugar-protein compounds are called advanced glycation end products, or AGs. They accumulate in tissue over time, and they are especially destructive in the brain. Think of AGs as rust forming on the machinery inside your brain cells. A small amount of rust, the machine still runs. But decade after decade of accumulation, and eventually that machinery seizes, the cell cannot function. The neuron dies. This is not about one slice of bread. It is about the pattern. White bread at breakfast, a roll at lunch, pasta at dinner, crackers before bed. Multiply that across 30 years, and you begin to see why researchers are finding direct connections between high glycemic diets and accelerated cognitive decline. These foods feel normal because they are everywhere. That is exactly what makes them dangerous. This one is going to make some people uncomfortable, because dairy has been positioned as a pillar of good nutrition for as long as most of us can remember. Calcium for strong bones, protein for muscle. Milk does a body good. That message was effective. It was also incomplete. Let me be precise about this. Moderate dairy is not the problem. A serving of yogurt, some milk in your coffee, a reasonable portion of cheese on a meal, that is not what I am talking about. The pattern I see constantly in patients over 50 is something different entirely. Cheese on eggs in the morning, cheese melted on lunch, a cream-based sauce at dinner, butter on every piece of bread, ice cream before bed, dairy at every single meal, in large quantities treated as an unlimited food group with no consequences. The consequence is saturated fat, and in excess, saturated fat does two specific things to your brain. First, it promotes the formation of beta-amyloid plaques. These are protein clumps that accumulate between neurons and are one of the defining hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Amyloid plaques disrupt communication between brain cells and eventually trigger cell death. Second, excessive saturated fat raises LDL cholesterol, what most people know as bad cholesterol. LDL damages the small blood vessels that feed your brain. The walls thicken, the openings narrow, blood flow decreases. That is the vascular dementia pathway again, the same one we saw with sodium and processed meats. Research from the Mind diet studies showed that people who limited high-fat dairy to 1 serving or fewer per day had measurably slower cognitive decline over time compared to those who consumed it freely. The message here is not to throw out every block of cheese in your house. It is to stop treating dairy as though the quantity does not matter. It does. Your brain is keeping count even when you are not. I saved this one for last because it is the one that will get the most pushback. For decades, the message was clear and comforting. A glass of red wine with dinner is good for your heart, good for your brain. The French drink wine every night and they live forever. That narrative felt wonderful. It also turns out to be wrong. Newer, larger studies have systematically taken that claim apart. The earlier research had serious flaws in how it grouped non-drinkers, often lumping in people who had quit drinking due to existing health problems, making moderate drinkers look healthier by comparison. When researchers corrected for that, the protective effect of moderate drinking essentially disappeared. Here is what alcohol actually does to your brain. It shrinks the hippocampus, the region responsible for forming and storing memories. It disrupts neurogenesis, the production of new brain cells. It inflames the blood-brain barrier, that microscopic security fence we discussed earlier, punching holes in the screen and letting toxins leak into brain tissue. And it depletes B vitamins, especially thiamine, which your brain cells need to convert glucose into usable energy. Without adequate thiamine, neurons cannot power themselves even when fuel is available. Data from the UK Biobank, one of the largest biomedical studies ever conducted, showed that even moderate drinking, 7 to 14 drinks per week, is associated with measurable loss of brain volume. Not heavy drinking, moderate, the amount most people consider perfectly responsible. The French paradox was a statistical artifact, not a prescription. Here is the reality you need to sit with. Alcohol is not a nutrient your brain can use. It is a solvent your brain has to survive. Every single exposure costs something. You may not feel it the next morning. Your hippocampus felt it. Your blood-brain barrier felt it. The damage is quiet, cumulative, and it does not announce itself until the bill comes due years later. Now step back with me for a moment. We have gone through 7 foods: processed meats, margarine and cheap oils, sugary breakfasts, diet sodas, white bread and refined carbohydrates, excessive dairy and alcohol. 7 different items from 7 different shelves in your kitchen, but they are not 7 separate problems. They are one problem with 7 faces. Go back to the 3 mechanisms from the beginning of this video: neuroinflammation, insulin resistance, and vascular damage. Every single food on this list attacks your brain through one or more of those exact pathways. Processed meats corrode your brain's blood vessels with sodium and nitrosamines. Trans fats stiffen your neuron membranes. Sugar and refined carbs drive the insulin resistance loop that starves brain cells of fuel. Artificial sweeteners inflame the gut-brain axis. Saturated fat in excess promotes amyloid plaque formation. Alcohol dissolves your blood-brain barrier and shrinks your memory center. Now here is the part that matters most. Nobody eats just one of these foods. The typical day for most Americans over 50 looks something like this: toast with margarine and juice for breakfast, a deli sandwich for lunch, crackers and cheese in the afternoon, pasta with a cream sauce for dinner, a glass of wine before bed. That is 5 of the 7 foods in a single day. And tomorrow looks the same, and the day after that, 1 slice of white bread will not give you dementia. But 30 years of daily white bread plus processed meat plus diet soda plus alcohol plus cheese at every meal creates a biochemical environment where your brain simply cannot defend itself anymore. The 3 pathways run simultaneously, day after day, compounding. Dementia is not a lightning bolt. It is not a disease that appears out of nowhere on a Tuesday afternoon. It is the endpoint of decades of small, daily, repeated choices. And that is actually the good news, because most of those choices can still be changed, starting now. I am not going to tell you to throw out your entire kitchen and start over. That approach fails every single time. People overhaul everything on Monday, and by Thursday they are back to exactly where they started, except now they also feel guilty. That is not medicine. That is punishment. And punishment does not produce lasting change. What works is small, specific swaps, one at a time, starting with the meal you eat next. Replace processed deli meat with actual cooked chicken or turkey. You still get your sandwich. You just remove the nitrosamines and cut the hidden sodium in half. Swap white bread for whole grain or sourdough. The sandwich looks the same. Your blood sugar response is completely different. Replace diet soda with water, sparkling water, or unsweetened tea. Your gut microbiome will begin recalibrating within days. Shift breakfast away from sugar, eggs, plain oats with nuts, a handful of walnuts with berries. That one change alone breaks the morning insulin spike cycle that has been running unchecked for decades. Reduce cheese to 1 serving per day. You do not have to eliminate it. Just stop putting it on everything. There is an eating pattern specifically designed to protect the brain. It is called the MIND diet, and it combines elements of the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. The research behind it is strong. The foods it emphasizes are not complicated: leafy greens, berries, nuts, olive oil, and fatty fish. These are the strongest brain-protective foods in the published literature. They reduce neuroinflammation. They support the blood-brain barrier. They improve insulin sensitivity in the brain. Here is the message I want you to carry out of this video. You are not powerless. Your brain is not on some irreversible countdown that you have no say in. Every single meal you eat is either contributing to the problem or actively working against it. The choice is on your plate, literally, starting tonight. Let me bring this together. 7 everyday foods: processed deli meats, margarine and cheap vegetable oils, sugary breakfast foods, diet sodas, white bread and refined carbohydrates, excessive cheese and full-fat dairy, and alcohol. None of them exotic, none of them obviously dangerous, all of them sitting in kitchens across this country, doing quiet cumulative damage through three pathways: neuroinflammation, insulin resistance in the brain, vascular damage to the vessels that keep your brain alive. This is not about eating perfectly. Nobody eats perfectly. This is about awareness and gradual, deliberate change. One swap this week, another next week, a pattern that shifts over months, not overnight. Your brain is more resilient than most people believe. It has repair mechanisms. It can adapt. It can recover lost ground. But it needs you to stop feeding it the things that are tearing it down. Everything we covered today is for your understanding and education. Your situation is specific to you, and using this as a starting point for a real conversation with your doctor will always be more useful than trying to manage things on your own. And if you have not done it yet, that free health screening link is still in the description. 30 seconds, no cost. It could be the most important thing you do for yourself today. Take care of yourself.